This is called Lenses versus Apps. It had a much longer name on the outside, but I decided to shorten it. We're talking about whether you should make how do you deploy smartphone AR content? Should you make an app, like an ARKit and an ARCore app, or should you make a lens or a camera effect that can run inside Snapchat or Facebook? So I'm Ralph from FLARB, and AR, VR developer. And in fact, last year we won the 2017 Augie Award for our work with Microsoft and some other partners on the HoloLens Easter egg hunt. We built this like crazy 30-foot by 30-foot styrofoam forest in the LA Convention Center. And when you wore a HoloLens, you could walk around and you could see these like little creatures. You could interact with these rabbits, and the set was laser scanned, so it was occluded. And this rabbit jumps behind the thing, and these 4 to 6 people can have this amazing experience where they interact with these Easter eggs and open them up. And we got all this press and won this award, and there had never been a mixed reality experience like this before. And after it was done, nobody cared. And the reason why nobody cared was weeks later, Apple announced ARKit. And so that started this whole chain of events. Google's ADD kicked in, and they killed Tango, and then came up with ARCore. And then Facebook announced the camera effects platform, which was their version of Snapchat's AR masks. And then, not to be outdone, Snapchat announced the World Lens platform, which then brought their AR features into the real world with SLAM using the rear-facing camera. So the end result of all this was that smartphone AR is back, and that's all anybody wanted to talk about. Nobody wanted to talk about HoloLens. Nobody wanted to talk about mixed reality. Everybody that I talked to wanted to know about how they get AR content on a phone, which for somebody who's been working in AR for a long time is kind of disappointing, but it's actually not so bad now, because now there's a lot of new technologies around. There's, as we said, apps like ARKit and ARCore apps, and there's lenses such as Facebook and camera effects and Snapchat World Lenses. So when you look at ARKit and ARCore apps, we've all seen them. You've got games, like the simple puzzle game. It's kind of like an inverse version of Jenga. Here I'm playing it on the desk that I actually made this presentation on. Simple puzzle games like this. You've got this like RC car game that uses more advanced shaders and the full power of the iPhone to display more advanced graphics using SLAM to put this little car on the floor. And you could even have like interesting sort of hybrid entertainment consumer apps like this weird one. This is Hot Stepper, where you type in a map location and this like weird fat naked guy appears in the street and starts walking around. He actually walks in the real world to your destination. In this case, I was walking to my 7-Eleven. If I held the camera up, I could actually follow this guy to the 7-Eleven, which is like this crazy app that I thought was amazing and only had like 15 reviews, which kind of speaks to the problem of apps, is that the discovery is a huge problem, and nobody, trying to get people to download them is kind of a huge problem. But also it speaks to the sort of an aside that the vast majority of ARCore and ARKit apps are games and entertainment apps. So, all you guys out there in the Expo Center, showing pipes to architects and stuff and exploded airplane engines with your little enterprise solutions, that's cute, but the real money is going to be in consumer applications and entertainment. 5 years from now, Augmented World Expo is going to look like Comic-Con, instead of a stuffy enterprise conference. So, now when it comes to lenses and camera effects, they might look a little similar, but they're much smaller in scope. In this case, these are 3 lenses that I built in Snapchat World Lens, but you could do them in Facebook as well. It's the same idea. In one case, this is actually on my business card, which if you're lucky enough to get it, you can get this little version of me that when you scan the snap code, there's a rigged and animated version of me that don't ask me to do that dance. I don't know how to do it. But it's a little rigged and animated character, which just happens to be myself, that dances around. That's the entire lens. It's pretty simple. You can track your facial features, so you can make a mask. But you can also use facial expressions to trigger actions. In this case, every time I open my mouth, some food flies in. And if you tap the screen, it switches to the different meals. But you can also do kind of like almost a complete application. So in this case, this is a little whack-a-mole game, this last lens here. And it's a complete game. It has collision detection. You tap on these little moles, and they go back down in the holes, and it tracks the score. And as a game over state, it's a complete application built inside Snapchat's World Lens platform. So, they're small and they're tiny, but you can kind of see where we're going here. They're kind of like complete applications. So, of course, there's pros and cons to both approaches. So in the case of apps, the pros are, you have full capability of the phone. So you have, a very powerful phone in your pocket that you can do all kinds of crazy stuff with. You have ARKit and ARCore, which are free. Back in the day, you had to license APIs, but these are free, and every 6 months, they get major upgrades. I mean, I can't wait to hear what's going to happen to WWDC. You get like this windfall every 6 months of increased capabilities from ARCore and ARKit. Basically, you know how apps work. There are some benefits, of course, to an app, but the cons are discovery, like we were talking about. Discovery is a huge problem. And also, if you want to address all of the phones, you're going to have to also use the old style, Wicked 2, View 4. You're going to have to license something, perhaps, because ARCore and ARKit only work on newer phones. It's more of a problem on Android, of course, because fragmentation is an issue. But even ARKit, works on, maybe the iPhone 6S and above. So if you want to address a wider swath of phones, you might have to go with a software-based solution, or rather a third-party solution, which kind of makes maintaining Android and iOS versions a little tricky. But really my real issue is just discovery. It's just very expensive to get people to download apps. I mean, when people come to me with a new app idea, I just kind of ask them if they have $10 million, because that's how much it's going to cost to get enough users to download your app. So with lenses and camera effects, what are we talking about? We're talking about, like we said, and we'll explain how they work and how they're built, but they're little tiny JavaScript applications that you can download inside Snapchat, inside Facebook, soon to be inside Instagram, and execute over the camera feed in sort of a highly sandbox environment to build like a little miniature AR experience. So there are pros and cons to this approach. In the case of pros, it's frictionless distribution. We'll talk about we'll show you how they're distributed. But in the case of Snapchat, you just show somebody your snap code, and they can take a picture of it, and they instantly can download your snap code, your lens. In the case of Facebook, it's a little bit more convoluted. It's a link, but also they have creator programs that kind of give you a little bit of support, because they're trying to cultivate an ecosystem, and they work on like all phones. So, well, maybe not all phones, but a much wider swath of phones than you would get with just ARCore and ARKit. And because you have a huge audience of over 2 billion users on these social networks, but also because these platforms are constrained and sandboxed, your project can't get that big. So you're kind of like, you can't have feature creep. You can easily tell a client when they ask you if you could do something, you could just tell them no, because it won't fit, and they're just going to have to deal with it. The cons of lenses are, those performance restrictions we were talking about. There's some things you just can't do in a lens that you can do in an ARKit app, and you may have a very good reason to make an app because you just need certain technical features that you can't get in the lens. Also, you're limited to the demographics of Facebook and Snapchat. Some of your users just aren't on either one of them, or they might skew too young or whatever, and for what you're trying to do, it just might not work. Also, keep in mind that these platforms have strict content restrictions, so it's much more restrictive than the App Store. You might have like I had a lens that had like a robot with a gun on it, and it wasn't allowed to be published because that violates the content restrictions, whereas it would be fine to do that in an app. So sometimes your content just will not be able to be deployed because of the platform restrictions on both lens platforms. And you're going to have a limited set of features because it works on so many phones. You're not necessarily going to have all of the new features of ARKit and ARCore in a lens or an effect. But the big issue here is there's no way to monetize users, at least no way yet. You can't have ads, you can't have in-app purchases. So if you're thinking of making a business model out of AR, this might not work for you because you can't really monetize users yet in a lens. So how do you make these lenses and how do they work? Well, in the case of Facebook, you download AR Studio. And the interesting thing here is AR Studio looks like a little baby version of Unity. It's kind of like, you see in the left-hand corner, you've got the hierarchy view, the project view, you have like your game, your sort of stage view, then you have like the game preview on the right, and then on the far right, you have what is essentially the inspector. And so it looks a lot like Unity, and the features are very similar to Unity. It's a little tiny 3D engine, it's embedded inside Facebook, and it has animation, particles, and lighting, the features you've come to expect from Unity. And it's kind of an interesting little JavaScript SDK. It uses reactive programming, which I think is a little weird, but it ends up working okay for what you're trying to do with it. But it also has this patch system, which is like a visual programming language, kind of like Playmaker or whatever. So if you don't want to learn how to code or you don't know how to code, you could still make camera effects by kind of wiring things together with a node graph. And they have a lot of new features coming out. Image detection, like old school image targets. They have, I don't know, I've seen the demo, but not tried it in real time, but they have body pose detection. I don't know how well that works. They have hand tracking coming out. And it's eventually, soon, they announced at F8, going to work on Instagram and Messenger. So it's a definitely very interesting little JavaScript platform. In the case of distribution, and this is a case of showing you what's capable, this is in the, there's actually a Facebook group for AR developers here, for Facebook AR developers. And in this case, this guy posted his lens, and you click on this link, and when you click on the link, it brings up the camera and immediately installs this lens in your camera feed. And as an example of how powerful the Facebook SDK is, it has a lot more features that you would, like for instance, you can access external data with a REST API. And in this case, this guy is showing the flight paths from SFO in real time by bringing it in through a REST API and just plotting the flight paths in AR on my bedroom floor. So you can kind of see, like, you could connect to other data sources. You could even access part of the Facebook graph. And you could do kind of interesting applications that go beyond simple little parlor tricks. So there are performance restrictions, and you can go look them up. I mean, but bottom line is you have to fit it in 1.6 megs, and to do that, you're going to have to keep the detail of your models down and also use a lot of different compression options on your textures. They give you a couple different options here from JPEG to PVR. But bottom line is these might not be hard limits, but you should keep within these limits to not only fit inside the regulations, but make it performant on the most phones possible. So Snapchat's Lan Studio, it looks very similar. It's another sort of like baby version of Unity, similar situation. You have the hierarchy, the project view on the left, you've got your stage view in the middle. You got my little console, which I'm printing debug messages to on the bottom. On the right, you've got the inspector, essentially. And then on the far right, you have a preview window. So you can preview your content in the editor. And it's a similar situation. You have a little small embedded 3D engine. It uses JavaScript. It uses a more traditional JavaScript programming model, so it's, I think, a little bit easier to use. It has a smaller feature set than Facebook's, but it seems to focus more on the visuals. Like, they have PBR materials and stuff, so it really focuses on making animations and making 3D models really pop. And this isn't just in Snapchat, but it's also in Facebook as well. You get instant plane recognition, which is another reason why I like these platforms. There's none of this nonsense where you have to walk around with an ARKit app and scan the point cloud until planes start popping up, and it takes 30 seconds to a minute. As soon as you bring up a Snapchat lens, there's a plane right there for you. So I mean, the ARKit and ARCore performance in that respect is actually kind of bad, and these lenses actually work a lot better and make them a lot easier to use. So distribution, pretty simple. This is my business card. I have a couple in here if you want one, but you can just snap it, and then when you snap it, it brings up this little window that says, hey, would you like to unlock this lens for 24 hours? And when you unlock it, there's a little tiny version of me on my desk dancing around. And that's about it. You can also provide a link, but it's a pretty frictionless way to distribute AR content on a smartphone. So they have platform restrictions as well. They're a little bit looser than Facebook's in some respects. They could be up to 4 megabytes, but they recommend 2 megabytes to keep that download size optimal. And you can have bigger textures, but they don't have as many compression options. So a lot of these are perhaps soft limits. Like, you might be able to skirt around some of them just as long as your lens works. But if you stay inside, if you color inside these lines, you're pretty much, your lens is going to work on as many phones as possible. So another thing I'd like to talk about, just one comment about this process and why I like it so much, is that the workflow is so much easier than building an ARKit and ARCore app. This is a project I've been working on. It's actually, this lens was supposed to be out by the time I gave this talk, but it's still not. So just don't tell anybody. But this lens, you can see here in that preview window, it's providing me dummy plane data. So this is like a picture of some backyard or whatever, and has a plane there. And inside the editor, I can move around my object, I can edit the code, I can view in real time what's going on the stage. And so I don't have to build to the device every time I want to check something out in the real world. I can actually preview it in using this dummy plane data. And also, if I want to check the mask features in Snapchat, I can switch to the front camera, and I can either use a video file or I can use my webcam and preview this mask in real time. And to be honest, I tried to port my little whack-a-mole game to ARKit for the sake of this presentation, and like I made that lens in like a day and a half at Snapchat. It took me like a week to port it to ARCore and ARKit because the test debug loop took forever, and it was just demoralizing and miserable. Unity really needs to get it together. If they really want to be the engine for AR, they need to come up with something as easy as this to test your content on. It made the developing AR content painless. So, can you make a business out of this? Is this a business opportunity? And I'm not so sure yet, because the thing about it is like we're seeing this rise of consumer AR culture. It's really easy to make these lenses. Anybody can make them, and anybody does. So like if you go on the Snap Lenses subreddit, you can see like somebody will just ask like, hey, does anybody have any ideas? I'll make a lens for you. And you'll see in like an hour, those lenses will be up for people to download. So, you know, if you think you're going to charge agency prices to build lenses for clients, they're probably just going to go to a 13-year-old on Reddit and have it made for no money. And because you can't monetize users with ads or in-app purchases, I'm not sure where the business model is going yet, but we're seeing this like crazy sort of like 3D meme generation culture that nobody really expected kind of emerge out of nowhere, and it's significant. I don't know what it means yet, but there's something going on here. It's kind of compelling, and I think that we definitely need to keep our eyes on this because this really looks like the biggest platform to distribute AR content for smartphones on. I mean, basically, if you have if you want to make an ARCore ARKit app, you better have a very good reason because of the discovery issues and such. I think that you definitely should always ask yourself if you could do what you're doing in a lens first. So I think we made it out of the time limit. If you want, you could snap that snap code right now. You can get a 3D version of me. That way, if you don't want to hire me as a consultant, you can just have a virtual version of me walking around your office, and it's almost the same thing. You can email me if you have any questions, but also if you want to get started developing these lenses and these camera effects, you can click on these links here. You got the Lan Studio at snapchat.com, and also this big link here for Facebook downloads their AR Studio app. It's pretty much available to everybody, and you can start developing now. So, yeah, I guess we just made it. We have time for questions, I guess, if anybody has any questions. 1 minute for questions. All right. Oh, there's one. Oh, yeah.
So you're obviously at the forefront. I mean, you're one of the first to do the HoloLens stuff. You see all these new hardware, kind of AR cloud coming out with this Lan Studio. Where is your passion now? Where do you spend your time outside of record?
The question is, where do I spend my time? What am I passionate about? I mean, I still think AR headsets are awesome. And I think they're cool, and that's obviously the future. Everybody, I mean, Snapchat's making glasses. They're not AR yet, but I mean, like, you know, so I still like to see where the puck is going. So I'm still really excited about the wearable stuff, but I think that a lot of the ideas that you would bring to those, you can start building now on non-wearable platforms like this. So, you know, I spend a lot of my time on the places where I can actually make money, which is not on headsets right now, unfortunately, but a lot of my R&D time is on headsets because I think that that's kind of like, that's obviously the future, and those platforms have some crazy capabilities that let you do pretty awesome things.
Follow-up question is, where, on the other side, you said there's not much money in these filters, lenses. Where is the money?
The question is, where is the money? And I don't have the answer for that. The money for me is in like, I get random phone calls from people in trouble, you know, some agency, calls me and claims they have like $5 to make something in 2 weeks, but they actually had, $10 million and burned through all their clients' money, and now they're in trouble because they don't know how to make anything. I get those kinds of calls. So yeah, it's like, it's like the A-team. If you're in trouble, you give me a call, and I'll show up and tell you you're doomed. So I get a lot of that type of stuff. I do a lot of self-publishing of content. I'm actually working on something right now that's not even VR AR related. So yeah, I do a lot of a mix. But anyway, I think we just made it. Okay, cool. Thanks. Sure, thanks a lot.